Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ted Bogert with the TED Show. I've been looking forward to this show since I came up with the idea and then reached out to the one and only Coco Johnston, who is absolutely amazing and helped put this together. I had read so much and started seeing so much on the news. Stop Asian American Hate, the hashtag Stop AAPI Hate, and honestly, to 100% transparency, I had no idea what was going on. I felt incredibly ignorant. Once I started watching the stories and really kind of reading through and realizing this wasn't just something that happened because of an incident, this had been long term, and that the Asian American community had been dealing with it and just really hadn't gotten any PR or publicity about it, I really felt like it was important to put a face to what's going on. So these four very wonderful people said that they would come on the show and share their experience, share their input, share their thoughts. So I have James Chan, Will Chung, Sam Chen, and Leia Leitner on the show. Did I do it, Leia? I did it.
Yes,
all right.
You got it.
I'm very honored and humbled that you're here. I think it takes a lot to talk about issues like this, but I really think it's so important that people really understand from a very personal, local perspective what you've experienced, or at least what you have seen. So I want origin story just a little bit in the beginning. People want to get to know you and know who you are. And I'm going to start with ladies first, of course. Leia, tell us a little bit about you. I'm going to make you front and center for a bit.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Leia Leitner, and I am the former president of the Greater Orlando Asian American Bar Association. And I'm also a board of director for the National Association of Asian American Professionals. So I think that's why I heard about this show and I'm asked to speak on here. So I'm excited to be here and be part of this process with others.
Wonderful. Now, Leia, I'm going to tell you that you have a little bit of a vocal. This is why live is good. So you probably have to speak up or turn your volume up so people can hear you. All right. Okay. Now I'm just going to go top to bottom as I see it. James Chan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Ted. Again, my name is James Chan. I am a child of Chinese immigrants, and I've worked in Florida politics since I was in college, and I do legislative affairs work across the state.
Fantastic. Thank you for being on. Will Chung is up next. Hey, Will.
Hi, Ted. Thank you for having me. My name is William Chung. I'm also a member of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. I'm a consultant, entrepreneur. I own a marketing company. I'm also a first generation American-born Chinese. My parents, my mother's from Hong Kong, and my father is from mainland China. And he has a very interesting story, the way he made it to America. He basically deflected from China to America. So that was an interesting time. But thank you for having me, and I certainly would like to participate and share more about my experiences here in America. So this is a great opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing. All right, last but not least, Sam Chen. Hi, Sam.
Hi, thank you, Ted. Good to see everyone. I'm a Chinese immigrant from actually Wuhan, China. I moved to the States about 20 years ago to pursue my design engineering. So I have been an engineer for about 20 years in robotics and software. For the last 10 years, I've been taking up leadership positions with the local Chinese communities. So that's my experience.
Wow. All right, so I'm going to go kind of in the backwards order that we just did. Tell us a little bit about your experience. When you started to see this on the news, was this a first time for you? Had you personally experienced, had your family and friends experienced hate? Is hate a strong word? I'd really like you guys to kind of give us your initial perspective when I think we all began to see the news stories come out and we began to read articles. And like I said earlier, when I started the show, many of us were not aware of what was going on. We knew that there was discrimination and hate in all different cultures and ethnicities, but I don't think we had heard a lot about Asian American hate. and injustice and things like that. So let's start with you, Sam. Had you experienced, what have you experienced here? Have you experienced any of the hate? Have you experienced any of this discrimination? What's your personal or professional experience been?
Okay, so personally, I have not experienced direct hate from the people I deal with. Like, I've encountered the violence in my experience in the US, but sometimes it's hard to tell if the violence has anything to do with my race or ethnicity. However, I have a ton of secondhand narratives from my friends, because I have a lot of Asian friends, and they have told me a lot about the violence and discrimination they have experienced. I'll give you one example.
Yes, please.
I used to go to Miami to date a girl, and we went out to all the local Asian restaurants, and we are surprised to discover that not a single Asian restaurant owner was spared from robbery. It was almost like they all targeted, because all the Asian restaurants, they have cash. They have a lot of cash, and they don't have a lot of help from outside the Asian communities. So at the end of each day, they had to guard their cash and go home and then deposit the cash next day. And they know they've been tracked and robbed. Like they've been tracked every day, and every single restaurant was robbed, no exception. And you can ask anyone from the Chinese community down in Miami.
And you felt, or they felt like that was targeted because they were Asian.
I believe so. I believe, and they believe too, they are targeted because they're Asian, because it was a well-known fact that the Asians, they tended not to fight back as much, and they didn't know as much how to protect themselves, and they have less resources in terms of getting the law enforcement involved in the cases. And also they're immigrants, therefore they don't have as great communication skills. So they're less likely to be helped by others, and their stories are less likely to be heard or explained in the media. And all those factors go into the fact that they are a little bit at a disadvantage when the society notices what's happening to them and how to help them.
How about you, Will? Thank you for sharing that, Sam. How about you, Will? What have you seen or experienced or felt personally, or from people within your circle?
Well, personally, being an American-born, Chinese, growing up here in America, first of all, my story may be a little different than most. I am an A personality. I played sports growing up. Started with martial arts, soccer. I played freshman football on the football team, and I also participated in ninth grade, basketball for my school as well. So I was, I experienced, I guess, a bit of racism, being involved in certain sports, just being competitive in nature. I guess it was just more of a challenge, but I was also accepted on another note as well, because I was able to communicate and I was pretty much outgoing. So, there's two sides of the coin. At some point, I did experience some racism. I had to, defend myself on some occasions, and throughout my, my sports and academic career, so to speak. And throughout my neighborhood, growing up in Northern California, like if I can just sum this all up into a quick summary, growing up in Northern California, I moved to Florida when I was 10, but during the time when I lived in Northern California, I can remember my experience there with racism from predominantly Caucasian people in the area. And there was also, Mexicans in the area as well. I lived in a small town in Northern California. And, I can remember, there was a time where there was, where I experienced just an incident where they were just teasing and, making the eyes and just making the funny sounds and such. so I did experience that, from a personal perspective. But then I became, used to it. I kind of took a stand at one point, because I didn't like the way I was treated. And while I was in school, I didn't want it to continue. So I had to really speak up to make it known that I didn't like that. And I didn't enjoy being teased. So once
you were an advocate early on.
Yes, I was. And, by being an advocate, that allowed me to, throughout my years in junior high school, throughout my years in high school, there were other Asians that didn't have the type of personality that I had. And, they kind of like gravitated towards me for like friendship and kind of mentorship. And I kind of helped them, develop more of a personality to kind of understand that this is how America is. And people are going to, try you and, no matter what you do, you can try to kind of hide and, study and not worry about all this that's going on, with your peers. But people are going to try you. And, people within the Asian, I guess, within our Asian class in school, they recognize that. And, being that I was a martial artist and I knew other martial artists in the area and, just within my town, people knew of me and what I was about as far as my athleticism and, kind of kept people like protecting my younger brothers and people within my generation and the generations below were kind of like, I guess, shielded. It's like a little bit of a bubble at the time.
Sure.
But yes, as far as advocating for Asians and advocating for, people that didn't really speak up too much because all they really wanted to focus on was their studies, and being an A personality, I think that really, allowed me to kind of find like an inner calling, because this is something that really, genuinely affects me. And inside, I really feel that this is something that needs to be discussed, that hasn't been, discussed enough. And having this opportunity where we're able to share together. And I apologize if I'm taking up too much time. I'm trying to sum this up as much as I can. But I think this is an important moment for all of us to be able to share our personal stories so that people can hear what's happening. Because not enough information is being shared. A lot of this is being, swept under the rug throughout the time of Asian immigration into America, from all the various different periods of Asian immigration, Yellow Peril, all the various different historical events that have happened over time. Up until now, I think that the way Asians have been, I guess, treated in the news or in the media, we're kind of like, they don't want to talk too much about it. They want us to kind of, be quiet and just move on and keep doing what we're good at doing, which is like running businesses and doing what we're told to do and just being very compliant and being very.
You feel like they've wanted you to be compliant. Leia, have you experienced that too?
As far as being, yeah, I mean, technically
put into a place where you have to be, you feel like you have to be compliant because you are a minority, for lack of a better word, or at least that's the perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that in the sense that Asian Americans have been lumped as like the model minority, where they just look down and, just worked hard and that's what they kept doing. Personally, I've not felt that way. I've always tried to advocate for myself or the Asian American community as best as we can.
So have you experienced anything, Leia?
It's not funny, but more so when I was younger, did I ever feel any kind of racial or ethnic bias towards me? And it's, I can recall times in the playground where, there's kids that would come to me and say, "Hey, are you Chinese or Japanese?" And, my family and I didn't really talk about race as a thing. So, here I'm thinking I think I'm Chinese, because I had to be at least 50% right. But in actuality, I'm Filipino American. So I didn't really, I really needed to explain that there is an other category and that we are lumped in the same huge monolithic Asian American population. And so, so now I could just say, I'm not Mulan, more so Moana, so that people can understand that. But fast forward to my adult life, being the Asian American Bar Association president, kind of around this time, I had a lot of people come to me and talk to me about, the rise and uptick in Asian American violence, which, so happened to be associated with COVID-19, based on, some representation that originated in Wuhan. And so because of that, and because it's made such a political issue, when I was dealing with it at the time, there's such a, there's a balance between creating awareness and exacerbating the problem. So at the time, the solution there was to, create awareness, but, we didn't really publicize or talk about it so much. But since then, there's been, I think the data or the statistics say that there's about 3,795 incidents that are reported for anti-Asian American violence. And so now a lot of the community leaders in Central Florida are now going towards the awareness issue and coming together to resolve this issue.
Which I love to see. And then things like this, where you guys are willing to, as professionals, as members of the community, you're willing to come out and share your perspective. It just helps everybody with the awareness that you were talking about. Thank you. How about you, James?
So I think to your question, Ted, right, about hate is, if it's a strong word, I think it all starts with microaggressions. And I remember, being early in my political career in Florida, I worked for a high-ranking state elected official, and I would go to high-dollar fundraisers with her, and having people just assume that I was the catering help and not actually being able to be a guest at one of these high-dollar fundraisers where everybody was paying, $2,000 to attend, right? And someone just assumed I was like this waiter. And I think it starts with microaggressions like this, right? And I remember also at the start of the pandemic, just being in Target and walking down an aisle and someone immediately turning right around because I was coming down the aisle. And that the only reason why they're turning around is because of my ethnicity, right? And also these little microaggressions. And Asian hatred is not new in this country. We had Chinese Americans excluded in this country for decades because Chinese Americans were thought to be taking jobs away from white Americans, right? Or Irish Americans at the time. So this is not anything new. It's just a different iteration of Asian hate.
It's interesting to me because we still don't even talk about the internment camps very often either, and the dark history that we have there, like incredibly dark history. And so it's interesting that this has come up, and now because we have social media and hashtags and everything is recordable and reportable, and we can share information instantaneously, that I feel like people jump on the bandwagon and get educated a little more quickly, which is good. I just don't want it to be the cause of the month, because until the next thing comes up, which is why you all sharing your experiences is so important. We have to know that this continues to go on, and it went on before you saw the first hashtag of Stop Asian American Hate or Stop AAPI Hate. You saw it the first time on the news. It was going on long before that. One of the comments that I saw, I did a show where we talked about racial injustice in the Black community, and about how people were like, God, is this just epidemic now? And somebody said, no, it's because they record everything now. Everything gets caught on tape. You can see this behavior that you can't imagine other human beings doing to another human being just because of your race or the way you look or their perception that you're a waiter, the insane stuff. I mean, to me, that's just crazy. But I feel like we need to continue to talk about it so it doesn't go away again, quote unquote, in the news. What would you say to somebody? We'll start back with you, James. What would you say to somebody who says, all right, well, what is it that I can do? What can I do as a person who doesn't feel that way, but I really don't want to get involved? What is it that I can really do to help educate or become more aware? How can we get people to embrace the fact that this is happening and want to do something about it?
Sure, Ted. I think the first thing they need to do is really self-examine how they interact with the Asian American community. I think that a lot of times everyone has microaggressions, right? And we just need to work on that ourselves before we can work on this larger issue about the stereotypes that we have about Asian Americans. The other thing is, there are immediate calls for more policing. That's not always the answer. We see that in the Black community. We see that in the Asian community, right? If more policing was the answer, this wouldn't be an issue. So that can't be the automatic solution, right? But we also need to think about bystander training. We saw, I don't know if you all saw, but 2 weeks ago in New York City, an elderly woman, Filipino, was walking to church Sunday morning and she got attacked. And two people in the apartment building where she was walking by just literally watched her get attacked and closed the front door on that and watched it all happen. But those are the things we can do, right, as ordinary citizens. And then lastly, as someone who works in politics, really getting civically engaged. How do we get our Asian Americans to be more civically engaged so that we can have our voices heard? How do we register more voters? How do we get them involved in the process?
Thank you for that, because I agree. And I feel like that story you told, it was the two security guards at that building that shut that door and just watched that poor woman get beat up. Just horrible. I don't know how you live with yourself, but that's the kind of mentality we have. Oh, I don't want to get involved, or that's not my problem. Trust me, it's all of our problem, because
and I'll also say, Ted, that of the official hate crimes that are reported, about 6 to 8% of them are AAPI women.
So I was going to ask, it's great lead in. Thank you. Because, you have Asian American, but you also have an added factor to that, Leia, as a woman. So has that made an impact on you? Have you seen, or do you feel that it's just an added thought process that you have to get past? Because not only are you dealing with any kind of Asian American discrimination, but women get discriminated against and have all sorts of issues all on their own. So you throw the two together. What are your thoughts on that?
I know I got the double-edged sword. You just educate the community and create awareness. And one other thing that's kind of telling is that although it's just reported by Asian American women, that's not to say that Asian American men, that it doesn't happen to them. It's just not reported. But to me, as far as being an Asian American woman, that sets the fire for me to create a lot more education and awareness. And I do have 2 plugs for that. Tonight at 6:30, NAP, the National Asian American Professionals, we're doing a meeting at 6:30 via Zoom for the President's Council. It's kind of like a United Nations Asian American conglomerate for us to talk about, to resolve issues and to come together. And then on April 28th, GOABA, the Greater Orlando Asian American Bar Association, we are having a kind of a guest panel for the FBI, representatives of the FBI. It's an assistant United States attorney, basically, and the co-founder of Stop AAPI, to talk about these issues, to create, again, more education and awareness, and to educate the public on these issues and try to resolve it and come together.
The coming together is important, and the consistent coming together is really where it's at. It's not like anybody expects the problem to go away overnight just because we're having a first panel discussion on it. It's a constant re-education and education and more awareness and more education and more shedding the light on things, I feel like. What can we do? I'll go to Sam, and then I'll finish up with Will. What can we do, Sam, if somebody, and I'll give you an example. Before you guys went live, James and I were here for a second, and I said, until I saw the hashtag Stop AAPI Hate, I didn't even know what PI stood for. So here I am going to let you know in on my ignorance. But that's part of the problem. I didn't know. So what can we do? How can we get the word out? How can we get it up. PI, by the way, stands for Pacific Islander. I had to look it up. I mean, you guys know that, but I'm telling the audience, sorry. So when it says stop AAPI hate, Asian American Pacific Islander hate, what can we do to get better educated, Sam, from your perspective as the engineer kind of thinking man?
So our society has been doing a great job since the murders in the Atlanta. I think it's the first time, as far as I recall, the entire Asian community really rallied to the call, and they made protests and visuals in all major cities in the U.S. So we still need more education out there. We need to let everyone understand what Pacific Islanders, like what kind of people they encompass. But at the same time, I want to put the emphasis on one thing. So the kind of hatred or discrimination we're talking about, they're not individual incidents of verbal assault or physical assault Asians encounter on the streets. No, in my mind, the discrimination against Asians is actually much more systematic and much more pervasive than just the individual incidents. For example, a lot of problems come from the restricted immigration against the Asians. Asians are the people, they are the most populous continent on earth, right? And a lot of them would love to immigrate to the US. But even today, we only have 5% of the entire US population being Asian. Why? Because historically, even until today, Asians have been restricted in terms of how many of them could immigrate to the States. Particularly for Chinese immigrants, for Indian immigrants, for Filipino immigrants, they oftentimes have to wait between 10 and 20 years to come to this country. Whereas for most other countries in the world, for their citizens, it might be just 3 years. So that's a fact. And the education opportunity is not the issue for Asians. Asians, they tend to study hard. Their parents push them to go to college, but they face a different set of standards when they're admitted to the colleges, particularly the elite colleges in the States. They face much higher bar. And a lot of Asians are asking why their labor will just go to waste because they are facing totally different set of standards. And another pervasive mentality of the society is all Asians look alike. No matter whether you're Filipino or Japanese or Korean or Mongolian or Chinese, they all group into Chinese. So I don't think that's fair, and the people think Asians all look alike, and I think people need to be educated to know that if a Japanese person is called Chinese, Korean person is called Filipino, the person might feel some insult. And the last thing I want to mention is actually America had more wars against more Asian countries than any other continent. America fought wars against Vietnam, Korea, Japan, China, the Philippines. So there's a lot of historical issues that are left over from the wars. I'll give you one example. The Vietnamese Americans, a lot of them, they had like half American, half Vietnamese parents. And I meet them at the Vietnamese restaurant. They tell me that their American parents would not take them in. So I hear stories all the time. And when you have those things going on, it's hard to say, oh, we're going to respect Asians, we're going to treat them as equals, because some of our historic events and some of our current policy, they don't treat Asians as equals. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I just want to give, before I follow up or finish up with Will, Blake Safford said, Leia Leitner for president.
I know him.
I thought I'd throw a little lightheartedness in there. Thank you for that.
That is hilarious.
All right, Will. So, Mike, we had a lot of people, because again, I think people come to the show and they really, when I have people ask questions, they are asking it, I think, from a good place. So that's where I'm going to go with this. I had several people go, listen, is this just part of the whole political BS back and forth that's going? These are their words, not mine. Is this just the cause of the moment? Is this just really for show and tell until the next thing comes up? I've never seen anything. I can't even tell you some of the comments. I'm saying them more sarcastic than they did. But I think the bottom line was, I've never seen it. How could I possibly have not known this is going on? All to you, Will.
Well, I completely agree with the systematic issues that we're facing here in America. From my standpoint, I've married into, I've assimilated, I would say. My wife's American, and my children are mixed. And, I find that there's not much cultural, historical history being taught, and mainstream media that's being shared, in the past as opposed to, today. So there's a lot less. Well, there's more of this now, but there was a lot less, mainstream media identifying Asian, pop culture and Asian American pop culture, or our experiences here in America. So I think that just recently, with various different shows that have become popular, and various different movie stars and movies that have recently have come out in Hollywood, I think that's identifying more, bringing people into the light and sharing, more about Asian American pop culture and how, we've experienced life in America from a cultural, popular pop culture type of.
And then I don't want to cut you off, but the StreamYard is going to cut us all off in a minute because I went over time. All right, so big thanks to James Chan, Will Chung, Sam Chen, and Leia Leitner. I just am so heartfelt thankful that you guys came on and shared. I'd love to continue having the conversation because I think it's important that we don't stop here. All of us need, not you all, we all need to be educated and made aware of what's going on. And the only way to do that is to continue to talk to people who have experienced or have seen it, live it on a daily basis. And so I'm very thankful to Coco and to you for coming on and sharing your journeys. I've tagged everybody. So if you all have questions, you want to reach out to Will or James or Sam or Leia, you can find them. If not, I will get you in touch with them. Thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing your awareness and what goes on in your world. Very important stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
All right, guys, have a good night. Thanks, everybody. You had tons of questions. Reach